Turn to Proverbs 5:18. I'm going to cover a couple of more Proverbs tonight, Lord willing. Almost through chapter 5 now. Proverbs 5:18 says, "Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth." So we talked about back there in verse 16, "Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad in rivers of waters in the streets." And we saw there by some comparative study that the fountains were the source of the children that issues from the man's marriage. And so this is what he's referring to again here, "Let thy fountain be blessed." Blessed means consecrated, hallowed, holy, consecrated by a religious rite or ceremony, enjoying supreme felicity, happy, fortunate. It also means bringing or accompanied by blessing or happiness, pleasurable, joyful, blissful. So let thy fountain be blessed. And there's a couple of different ways in which this is true, kind of following the definition of the word there as they go in order. The man who's married to a godly woman will have a blessed fountain in the primary sense of blessed because his children will be holy, being the product of a God-blessed marriage. The first definition there again is consecrated, hallowed, holy, consecrated by a religious rite or ceremony. And a marriage is a religious rite or a ceremony, really. And so his children are consecrated in that sense. And I'll give you a verse that is related to this anyway, in 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 14. Not a direct parallel text, but it's closely enough related. I think we can make an application here pretty easily. 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 14 says, "For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy." So Paul's instructing husbands and wives to stay married to each other, even if a husband's married to an unbelieving wife or vice versa. The husband's not to put her away, and the wife is not to leave him if she's pleased or he's pleased to dwell with her. And then here's the reason for that in verse 14 that we just read. Because the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and vice versa, the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. And then he says, "Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy." So if you are, in some sense, if you're married, if one of the people in the marriage is a believer, then the other one is sanctified. And I think that's just because the house is blessed, that God's blessing is upon the house and upon the relationship, even though only one of them is a believer. And the children are likewise blessed. They're not unclean, they're not bastards, they were born in wedlock, and they are under God's blessing for the sake of the believing parent. And that really goes with what we're reading here in Proverbs 5, "Let thy fountain be blessed." So it's blessed in the sense of consecrated or hallowed or sacred, because God blesses a faithful man, and he blesses his children because of that man's faith. And then his fountain produced by holy matrimony will also be blessed in the secondary sense, because his children will bring him happiness and joy. In the secondary sense, blessed means enjoying supreme felicity, happy, fortunate, bringing or accompanied by blessing or happiness, pleasurable, joyful, or blissful. So the man and his fountain, his children, will be blessed in that sense too. Proverbs 23 and verse 24 shows us that children that have been brought up well to godly parents are a blessing. Children who have not been brought up well are a curse, and Proverbs talks about that too, that they are a grief to him to her that bear him, and a grief to her father and bitterness to her that bear him, I think is what it says. And there's several verses there. He that begetteth a fool doeth to his sorrow, and so on. Anyway, Proverbs 23 and verse 24 says, "The father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him," which is what blessed means there in that secondary sense. And in Psalm 113 and verse 9, the same is true of the mother, who is a mother of children, of godly children, well-disciplined and behaved children, that is. Proverbs 113 and verse 9. Proverbs 113. Psalm 113 and verse 9. If there were 113 chapters in Proverbs, I would be here for the rest of my career at this rate. Psalm 113 and verse 9 says, He maketh the barren woman to keep house, and to be a joyful mother of children. Praise ye the Lord. So yes, the fountain is blessed in both senses there. And God blesses godly couples with numerous children. Psalm 127, 3 through 5. Now, I issue a caveat here because there are certainly examples in the Scripture of godly couples who didn't have children, or at least not for a long time. Sarah was barren for, 25 years? Well, a lot longer than that, but from the time the promise was made, it was 25 years. Rebecca was barren for a while. Rachel was barren. Hannah was barren. Manoah's wife was barren, who had Samson. Elizabeth was barren. But it's interesting, somebody sent a letter to my wife and was saying that a lot of times the women in the Bible that are barren ended up bearing great men. If you think about it, Sarah bare Isaac, one of the patriarchs. Rachel bare Joseph and Benjamin, two of the most highly esteemed of the 12 tribes of Israel. Manoah's wife bore Samson, right? Great, big, strong man. I think that was Manoah's wife, right? And Hannah bare Samuel, one of the greatest prophets that ever lived. Elizabeth bare John the Baptist, the greatest prophet that ever lived. So it is interesting that it's like sometimes if you are barren and the Lord blesses you with children, you might end up getting a really good one that's going to be used of God greatly. So that was encouraging. Anyway, Psalm 127, verses 3 through 5. It says, Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. So the Lord blesses with children here. They're a heritage of the Lord. They're like the inheritance that God gives to a man and a woman. And happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. In other words, happy is the man that has a bunch of kids. That's a blessed man. Happy means coming or happening by chance, fortuitous chance. It is having good hap or fortune, lucky, fortunate, favored by lot, position, or external circumstance, blessed, beatified. So you're a blessed and a fortunate man if you have a bunch of kids. That's a real blessing. Just like this proverb that we're looking at says, let thy fountain be blessed. Right? And one way it would be blessed is by flowing and producing a bunch of children. That would be a blessed fountain. And if a couple has children, it's because God has graciously given them to them. Genesis 33 and verse 5. I think a lot of people just it's easy, and they just assume, it's not a gift from God, it just comes naturally. But some of us know that's not the case, right? It doesn't always come naturally, and it is a blessing from God, regardless if it seems to come easily or not. Genesis 33 and verse 5. This is whenever Jacob met Esau after many years of having fled from him, and he went off and married a couple of wives and had a bunch of kids, and now he's coming back. And it says there, and he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children, and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children which God hath graciously given thy servant. So Jacob was blessed with a lot of children, 12 of them, as a matter of fact. I don't know if he had 12 quite at this point or not, but anyway, he was eventually blessed with 12. And you'll remember in Hosea 4 and verse 10, we looked at that one last time, where it says that sinners shall commit whoredom and shall not increase. Right? So on the other hand, the man that fornicates and keeps company with whores, his fountain is not going to be blessed. He's not going to increase. He might end up having a ton of children, but his fountain is not going to be blessed. Right? Unfortunately, I know people like that just pop them out left and right and keep handing them off to grandparents and great-grandparents, and It's just sickening. So their fountain's not blessed. They're producing a lot, but it's quite sad. People like this, their bastard children, will also give them grief and pain rather than blessing and joy. You don't have to go too far in this day and age to find parents that will tell you that their children were not a blessing to them, sadly. And usually it's not the children's fault, it's their fault. Right? They blew it, and their children were trained by themselves, and if you allow a child to train himself, he's going to go in the wrong way, obviously. So let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. So let's look at the second half of that. Rejoice with the wife of thy youth. So a husband should rejoice with his wife. And to rejoice means to gladden, make joyful, exhilarate a person, his spirits, etc. So, contrary to a lot of people's sad experiences, marriage should be joyful and happy. It's not perfect, of course, and nobody has a perfect marriage, but marriage should be joyful. It's sad. There's a lot of people out there, their counsel to a young person would be, don't get married, it's awful. Right? And that's sad, but there's a lot of people out there that think that because they've just, they've had horrible marriages because both they and their spouses, just didn't make the hard decisions and do the right thing. But we're told in the scripture that a bridegroom rejoices over his bride. In Isaiah 62 and verse 5. See, this was back in the day before bride-to-bes and bridegrooms-to-bes didn't fornicate, so the bridegroom would rejoice over his bride because it would be a special, exciting time and night for him, whereas today, heck, they've already, he's already been getting the milk from the heifer for 2 years or something. It's nothing exciting at all. Isaiah 62 and verse 5. It says, for as a young man marrieth a virgin, so shall thy sons marry thee. And as the bridegroom rejoiceth over the bride, so shall thy God rejoice over thee. So a bridegroom should be rejoicing over his bride, just like God rejoices over us. We are Christ's bride, and he rejoices over us. So someday, whenever we get to heaven, and there's the marriage supper of the Lamb, actually it'll be in the new earth, it'll be after the resurrection, it'll be like a great big wedding celebration. And Jesus Christ, our bridegroom, will rejoice over us, his bride, just like a husband would rejoice over his new wife. So this joyfulness should not end after the honeymoon, because usually things go pretty well, at least until the honeymoon's over, and then reality sets in. There are some people that don't even last that long. I forget who told me they went down to the courthouse, or they were coming out of the courthouse. I think it was on a military base, and you know how some of those military weddings happen, for financial reasons or whatever. And they were coming out of the Justice of the Peace office. These people had just gotten married, walking out and fighting and cussing at each other. I mean, they literally had just tied the knot, and I just thought, wow,
I hadn't even gotten to the car yet.
Yeah, I hadn't even got to the car yet, and. So anyway, usually it lasts at least until the honeymoon, but it shouldn't just stop there. It will take work to maintain it, but it should be a happy, blessed institution. Husbands are supposed to live joyfully with their wives. Look at Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 9. Solomon's exhortation here to a young man is to live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of the life of thy vanity, which he hath given thee under the sun all the days of thy vanity, for that is thy portion in this life, and in thy labor which thou takest under the sun. Even in a life of vanity, which life often is, it does seem like it's pretty well meaningless and useless, if you're considering it just under the sun, if you're not considering it from a spiritual perspective and realizing that God has a purpose in all of it and that we ought to serve God no matter what, and we can do that no matter what our circumstance is, and that ultimately that gives life meaning because this life's not the end. This life is just the beginning and it continues on into eternity. When you realize that, then life is not vain. But if you're looking at it as Solomon is looking at it in Ecclesiastes, when you're just considering life on this earth alone, it is vain, it's worthless, it's futile. And there would be no reason to continue living if there wasn't the next life, if there wasn't the continuation. But even in this sometimes rotten world, as Solomon describes it here, he says, live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of the life of thy vanity. So a wife can be a great blessing even in, some difficult times when life isn't that great and there is a lot of sadness and sorrow, but a wife can be a great blessing to a man, and likewise a husband can be a great blessing to a man, and the two of you can be in it together. And as Solomon says, two are better than one. So you can really help to pick each other up and to help each other. And today, more and more, I just feel like I just want to be in my little bubble. I want to be in my apartment, and I want to be around my church. And if I never step foot in Kansas City again, I'll be a happy man. I hate that place. We just took my mom down there, and all these COVIDiots are running around in their cars with masks on, outside with masks on, and we are walking down the street, and people are driving by in their cars with masks on, looking at me like I have no pants on. I mean, they were just shocked, like, I'm outdoors with no mask on, and they are looking at you like I'm a mass murderer or something. If I never go to that place again, I'll be a happy man. I hate cities. They are full of lunatics. But anyway, even in this crazy world, I can just lock myself in my apartment with my wife and have church with you people and see you a couple times a week, and I'm happy. And I don't care what goes on out there. It doesn't matter to me how crazy the world is. It doesn't have to. I can live joyfully with the wife of my vanity. And I encourage you to do likewise.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Husband to a woman, not husband
He
to a
said
man.
husband to husband.
What did I say?
Husband to husband.
Oh, that's not what I meant.
You might honor.
Yeah, husband to wife is what I meant. Oh, where was I? Oh, yeah, so here's an example. Here's an example of a man rejoicing with the wife of his youth. Let's look back here at Isaac and Rebekah. Turn to Genesis 26 and verse 8. Genesis 26 and verse 8. It says, and it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, Isaac and his wife had sojourned in this land where in the Philistines, where the Philistines were. When he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah, his wife. So they were sporting. To sport is to amuse, entertain, to recreate oneself, especially by active exercise in the open air, to take part in some game or play, to frolic, or gamble. That's G-A-M-B-O-L. So they were sporting. I think some people think this means they were making out or something, and I don't think from the definition that's probably what they were doing. I think they were playing with each other, just kind of, just being playful, goofing around out there, where in the open where they could be seen. But whatever this sporting was, it was either, that's nice, bug. I'm always being accosted by bugs whenever I have this Bible study. Anyway, whatever this sporting was, it was either something that was particular to lovers, or it was done in such a way that only lovers would do, because when Abimelech witnessed it, he immediately knew that Isaac and Rebekah were married. If you look at the next verse. In verse 9, and Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, of a surety she is thy wife, and how saidst thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, because I said, lest I die for her. So he did the same thing that his dad, Abraham, did earlier when he lied and said that Sarah was his wife. Isaac did the same thing. He was afraid that they would kill him and take her. But anyway, the point is, when Abimelech saw them sporting, whatever that was, he immediately knew they were husband and wife. So whether they were making out or whether they were just being playful with each other, they were doing so in a way that was clearly romantic. Like you can see an adult man and a woman maybe just goofing around that are friends, and then you can see a husband and wife that are playing around, and it's obvious they're husband and wife, right? So whatever they were doing, it was sure, that they were. Now, without looking at the outline, how old do you think, and if you did look at the outline, don't say it, how old do you think Isaac was when he was sporting with his wife? Anybody have any idea?
50.
Anybody else?
I saw the outline.
You saw the outline.
I saw
I
the
did
outline.
too.
Okay, you did too. Well, he was at least in his 70s when he was sporting with his wife. Now that's pretty interesting, and I'll prove that to you here in Genesis 25, 26 through 28. So yeah, these guys that say, oh, that's just for newlyweds. Well, they've been married for a long, long time. They weren't newlyweds anymore. Genesis 25, 26 through 28. And after that came his brother out. This is when Jacob and Esau were born. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob, and Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So Isaac was 60 years old when Jacob and Esau were born. And then it goes on to say, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau, because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So I say in his 70s, at least he was 60 when they were born, and Esau was a cunning hunter and would go and get venison and bring it to his father. So obviously he had to be at least, I'd say 12, and probably more like 15 or 16 or 18 or something. So Isaac was minimum early 70s, could have even been late 70s. And yet he was playing around with his wife out there and being playful with her. So there you go. There you still have license to be playful with your wife even when you're elderly. So romance shouldn't end when youth does. Matthew Henry said, I thought this was good, he said, mutual delight is the bond of mutual fidelity. So if you are both happy and delighted with each other in your marriage, then more than likely you are going to both be faithful to each other, to the marriage. And then Henry also said, those that take not their comforts where God has appointed, those take not their comforts where God has appointed, who are jovial and merry with their companions abroad, but sour and morose with their families at home. So what he's saying is that if you are happy with your friends when you're outside the home, and you're sour and morose with your family when you're inside the home, you are not taking your comforts where God has appointed them. God has appointed that you should be happy in your home. That should be the main place of your happiness. So people that have to always be out running around, men in particular, there's a lot of men out there, right? They got to be running around. I think a lot of young men, when they first get married, are out running around constantly, going out with their buddies and doing things and involved in clubs and whatever else, and they're never home. And that's a recipe for disaster. So that's bad enough. But then when you have fun with your buddies outside, and then you come home and you're sour and morose with your family, you've got things turned around backwards. So as I've said before, a good rule of thumb is to treat your spouse as well as you do a stranger. If you can treat your spouse as well as you do a stranger, you'll be pretty happy, and so will he and she. So rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let thy fountain be blessed. That takes care of verse 18.